So, this game is Belzabor in English. This was a German RPG Maker 2000 game released back in 2005, but I want to say maybe even as late as 2004, depending on whether or not it was released in the German community a bit earlier or whatnot. But yeah, I remember discovering this game on Gaming Ground Zero. And I guess they just had a deal or something to host the game or something like that, but it was in German. That was like the main problem. And yeah, like I just saw the title screen image and I had zero expectations of what I was in for. It was just like, oh, there's a new game on Gaming Ground Zero. I'll go check it out. And mind you, there was like no way to really know, like, oh, like you would just check the website every now and then and there might be a new game updated. There was no way to, like, I don't know, there was no Twitter, there was no way to like get in the know. And so this game was like pretty, this blew my, just even this opening shot, like this game kind of blew my mind as far as like the lighting effects and the, like, just the constant, detail and everything. Like it uses custom artwork, but it doesn't use tile sets from existing ripped games like Terra Enigma, Chrono Trigger, and probably Second Death Into 3, which by the way is now called Trials of Mana. I keep forgetting that. But yeah, this game was such a big deal when it came out, because I don't even think there's anything like this in terms of, like, especially within RPG Maker, but like just in general, like a 2D RPG indie game. I think this kind of blew everything out of the water. Like I can't really list anything off the top of my head that would override this, basically. Because yeah, this was like 2005. RPG Maker 2003 had come out like 2 years earlier or so. And yeah, like the big thing with battle systems, especially at the time, was RPG Maker 2000 could only do first-person battle systems by default. But if you knew your way around the eventing system, which was sort of like a pseudo-scripting coding thing, which was mostly used for events like NPCs and treasure chests and cutscene dialogue and some minor like variable state changes or whatnot. But this game kind of took it to the next level because it really used the show picture command, which was, a very innocent sounding event command, like, oh, show picture, of course. But here, like, you can see the effect that you just saw right now is like a I guess a blur effect that you kind of see in I think it's called motion blur. Like from PlayStation 2 games, you would see that motion blur effect, and it's kind of imitating it, even though it's not really part of the system. But it's just taking the screenshot of the scene and then just using show picture and enlarging it and then making it transparent over and over, like just spamming it over and over. But the show picture command, like, it just shows an image at a specific coordinate, and it has some kind of effect stuff here and there. But the most important thing was that you could set the coordinate to a variable, which basically let you do anything. And yeah, we're going to see the battle system in action. And yeah, this was crazy. This, like, the camera move, just the animations and everything, like this smooth, the way he moves towards the enemy was just, I don't know, really cool. Because even RPG Maker 2003, the default side view battle system was sort of, like, it could have a character move up to an enemy, but it just wouldn't have that. It would, like, move up to an enemy and then, like, do an animation very awkwardly and then just kind of go back a little too soon. This was, like, just, I don't know, just something about it. The movement is a lot more carefully executed in a way that just, I don't know, it just feels like you're playing as the character as opposed to just selecting menu options and watching a character. And yeah, like, I just gotta say, this game holds up, like, even playing it now in English, because I remember back in the day playing this and being like, this game looks amazing, but it's in German. There's just like a point where I probably could have just played through the entire demo at the time. I probably did, but I know the game got updated since then. But yeah, I remember just kind of going like, but it would have been, it was harder to enjoy because you didn't really know what was going on in the story. I mean, with this intro, you can kind of get the gist of what's going on, but then it does some sort of like, time flashback kind of thing, or I guess it's like an in media res, but like in the future, supposedly. We're not really sure. Even in the English translation, it's a bit ambiguous of whether or not it's time travel or like alternate reality or whatever, because the game, I don't know what Velsarbor means, but I assume it has something to do with like the cycle of things, because right from the get-go, the game has a lot of themes of breaking the cycle, like getting out of this like, constant war, basically. And the intro is kind of following this guy named Selden, kind of trying to end that, basically. But yeah, like, so, yeah, that's the thing. Like, with this English translation, I can now kind of, in 2022, I can now enjoy this game in, like, this 100% way. I mean, nothing's ever going to be 100%. Like, I'm sure there's some things lost in translation no matter what. But, yeah, I don't know. Like, this was a crazy game back in the day. This was wild. Just even like simple things like the camera move at the start, that was like a detail that I feel like even the most hardened like CBS like programmers wouldn't go after that kind of thing. They're kind of just concerned with getting a battle system like functional at all. But this game really does hold up, like playing it now, like just selecting the commands and just kind of going through them. Because I feel like even games like Kindred Saga would have that kind of delay where it's like, like this could be a little bit smoother, or just could be a little bit like less awkward. And yeah, like the game just had so many bells and whistles. And yeah, like the whole thing, like back in the day was, well, now that RPG Maker 2003 comes out, what was the point of making CBSs, custom battle systems? And I think this game was a pretty good answer to that, which was you get more control, you get more fancier animations, especially with the show picture command. You can really push the limits of it. And actually, the weird thing was, since the fact that it was made in RPG Maker 2000 meant that it had more time to be made. Like there's more time going into it. Whereas like if you started with 2003, you'd have to port it, I guess. You could have ported it from 2000 to 2003, but anyway, point is like this game was made in RPG Maker 2000, and Gaming Ground Zero had a weird policy about only allowing RPG 2000 games, because it thought that like by not pirating 2003 or not promoting 2003 that it would the RPG makers would get localized one day, and they sort of did, but I don't know if the Gaming Ground Zero campaign really did anything. But that was one of the reasons why Belzabor was on Gaming Ground Zero. And yeah, this boss fight right here, I remember going nuts over this boss fight, just because you wouldn't see an animated, like, not only is it like custom art and then, like, animated and just going forward, shooting the laser, like all this stuff was just wild. And this intro is like kind of it's kind of scripted for you to kind of win anyway. That you constantly do counterattacks and whatnot. But yeah, this game was great. And yeah, another thing is like it has charge. I think it's called charge time battle system, where everything on the bottom basically shows like what action. But this attack, this limit break-esque thing, was insane. This was the moment where I was like, oh my god, because I think you can talk about game design, you can talk about story and writing and heart and all the stuff that makes a game good, But at the end of the day, we just want a fucking dude with a giant sword doing an anime sword slash. You know, like that's all you need. You know, that's all RPG maker games are really driving towards. You know, and yeah, like I can appreciate that aspect while also, you know, wondering, you know, does the game have a good story? Is it well paced? Is the gameplay good? I think, yeah, playing an hour of this game, I can definitely tell you that it's pretty good. It's not mind blowing, I guess. Like I'm trying to imagine showing you know, a person who's not really familiar with RPG Maker games, but kind of knows RPGs, like showing them this game, they'd probably be into it. Honestly, yeah, like if I were to compare it, there's still like indie RPGs have a rough time, I think, at this point, but yeah, they gotta show the animation. They gotta milk that animation all over again. But I mean, this game was made by the same person who worked on Crosscode. Yeah, another thing is this game was never really finished. It does have a sizable amount of content. Like looking at the current demo that's translated, I think it's fully translated. I would hope so, but it's like over 300 maps. So it's a sizable demo, even if it's not completely finished. But the author, Lashin, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. But the author said, like, you know, he kind of quit this project because it was just so large in scope. It was a lot more bigger than he anticipated. And then yeah, like I think that's the biggest thing with RPG Maker games is like, even if you can make a custom battle system, even if you can make the most impressive thing ever, you know, in the RPG Maker scene, it's gonna multiply the workload even more. I'm gonna read an excerpt from the interview by Lashin. Let me just pull it up here. Okay. So there's an interview by Tao to Lashin about, you know, the sort of looking back at Belzabor, and the question is asked, "What's been the most rewarding thing for you so far?" And Lashin replies, "Concerning my work with RPG Maker, that would probably be my second presentation of Velsarbor at some kind of community meetup we had in winter, I think 2004. I simply showed the intro of the demo and Selden's Lucis Las's attack. The whole audience fell silent during the attack animation, following a lot of cheering. I don't think I've had this kind of reaction ever before. That was certainly a very rewarding moment." So yeah, so certainly this, like, even so, like, I don't know, it felt interesting hearing about this local meetup with the German community, I assume, because I guess it's, you know, German speaking community is like, you know, it's a pretty, in a sizable, smallish country, right? Like, I mean, it's still a pretty big country, but fairly easy to get around and meet up, and just hearing about that anecdote is interesting because, I mean, I had the same reaction. I wasn't in that room, and I had the same reaction. You know what I mean? Just some random kid in Canada. I think there's sort of a collective knowingness of like how badass that limit break is, you know, because you didn't see it in RPG Maker games that much, or not ever. Like, and if you did, it was, I don't know. I can't think of any animation kind of thing like that, especially during a battle sequence. Like, if you were to do that in RPG Maker 2003, you could, but it would take a lot of finagling. But yeah, like that was the crazy thing back then. But yeah, going back to custom battle systems, you know, it probably, you know, isn't worth it making a custom battle system. Like, the author has clearly moved on to making Crosscode, which was not made in RPG Maker. I'm like tripping over my words. I have to say RPG Maker so freaking fast these days. I need to slow down too. But yeah, anyway, so RPG Maker, the author moved on from this program and made it into something else. And he didn't really make an RPG per se. He made more of an action RPG, which was like, I guess it's like a top-down, like trajectory based action game where you can like shoot projectiles and stuff like that, but still pretty much an RPG. And it you can definitely feel the DNA in it. And apparently there's like a Velsarbor reference in the game and whatnot. And the art style of the characters remind me of it. But yeah, the author's moved on. I don't think this game is ever going to get completed. And I understand because like Crosscode did very well. Just as an indie RPG success story. I would say it's probably one of the better, even like looking at Crosscode from just a production value, like art standpoint. It looks like a Super Nintendo game, like an amped up Super Nintendo game, and it kind of respects the aesthetics pretty well. Like if you were to go from Belzabor to Crosscode, I feel like it's not like he abandoned, his origins that much. Which I still need to play Crosscode because I'm like, Crosscode. But yeah, Belzabor was sick. And I guess it's like the thing about the translation was like I just heard about it on Discord. Like I didn't find out about it in any announcement or anything. Like RPG Maker community is kind of quiet these days, especially in regards to the older RPG makers. And Lord Blue Rouge just kind of let me know about it, and I downloaded it, and then I kind of didn't play it, and then I was like, okay, I have some time. It's a lazy Sunday. I can boot up Velsarbor and at least talk about it, because I think this translation needs bigger fanfare, because this game's pretty good so far. Like just playing it, and the story is like pretty interesting. It's pretty fun. It's well, I would say like the start of the story is actually pretty big. It's pretty big in scope. Like it's got this whole thing about cycles and this futuristic, like apocalyptic kind of setting, and then it like warps back to medieval kind of setting, and it makes you wonder like, okay, where's the story going? Like how do you end up there? Kind of in a blurred line kind of way. But yeah, Belzabor, quite a game. But yeah, like going back to custom battle systems, I keep going back to this topic, but I feel like, nowadays, if you were to make a custom battle system in RPG Maker 2003 or 2000 or whatever, it just doesn't seem logical. Like it just doesn't seem rational from a practical perspective. I mean, I love talking about custom battle systems. I love the peculiar, things and limitations that come with it. Just the idea of not being able to code, but being able to construct this RPG battle system from within a framework that's meant to make RPGs out of the box, but its eventing scripting system isn't meant to particularly, but it somehow does, right? You can't do arrays, but then, well, you can, point a variable to another variable. We call them variable pointers for some reason. So then you kind of have a makeshift array system. And then if you use patches, which this game does use, like probably some of the cherry patches to get around some headaches, like the show picture command particularly. Because the thing about like show picture commands is like you can update the same picture ID, but it's very time consuming if you to iterate through a variable and do a conditional branch for each frame of the image. So Cherry devised this patch where you would just set a variable to something, and whatever the current image is, you'd have the frame number in the file name of the image that you were updating through. So let's say you have like 10 frames of a guy walking. You have a variable count up from 1 to 10 to basically animate it, and whatever the current show picture command is, I believe so. There are things like that had to be used via hacking the RPG Maker 2000 thing, and that was thanks to Cherry, who is also German and is also a huge, still to this day, still like updating the the Din RPG patcher. I forget what it's called, but he's still doing stuff in the scene. He's still like contributing to it. He's responsible for the official RPG Maker 2003 like updated version of it. But I mean, due to like licensing issues, he's not like in full control of like what can and can't be done with the RPG Maker, oddly enough. But yeah, so yeah, in 2022 there was a topic about like, should I use a custom battle system for my game, for my RPG Maker 2003 game? And my answer is like, no. I love them. I love talking about them. I love this. Like, I love this. I love watching this like happen. Look at these menus and stuff like that. I love how unique these animations are and whatnot. And yet at the same time, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's not just because RPG Maker is like a really limited engine. It's also just because the interface for programming such a thing is just very cumbersome. Like, if you know how to make a custom battle system in RPG Maker, I think you're, I don't want to say you're smart enough, but I think you're like, what's the word? Because I don't want to make it about intelligent, but I think you have the know-how. I think you have like the know-how or like the tools, I guess. They like, I don't know. I'd say the toolkit, I guess, in your brain or whatever. You're able to probably learn programming at some point, and it's weird because with a lot of that lens flare, by the way, it's fucking sick. There was something that you would never see that in any RPG Maker game, even like clouds going over and stuff like that. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked by like the fancy effects in this game, but I feel like it's worth mentioning like what makes it unique about this game, like at the time. But yeah, with custom battle systems, it's like, I just don't think it's practical. Like, there would be like these people who were computer science students that could program in like C++, and they'd be like, "Oh, I made like Tetris in RPG Maker, or I made like, this 3D simulation in RPG Maker." And I'm like, "What are you guys doing? You could be like curing cancer. Instead, you're making like the most important like tech demo in RPG Maker history, and using like the craziest things possible, turning like, using variable pointers and all these crazy like programming things." And I guess it's just, there are just hobbyists out there that just love being trapped in a limited system and thinking their way out of it and devising solutions or workarounds to do something that they would normally be able to do easily in another programming language. There was a guy who could like, he made like his own Game Boy ROMs, like just, I assume out of assembly or something. But then he was also making RPG Maker projects just because, there are some weird limitations there. Even if you know your way around eventing, there's still like, there's show picture limits. There's like, it's really difficult to get a number on the screen, like a digit, like a number, like a variable on the screen, like displaying on the screen and having digits and whatnot. It's still very, very cumbersome. There's all these problems that come with it. But yeah, like, again, the more I think about it, the more I discuss it, I just think that, it just doesn't make sense. It did make sense in 2005 to make a custom battle system, I think, because there wasn't really anything else out there where you could make an RPG. But you have to think about this. You have an RPG Maker, right? And it gives you a database, it gives you a battle system, it gives you all these things out of the box. This menu here, this custom menu that this person made, probably doesn't use the database all that much, like the actual core database. It's probably using a lot of variables. Like I don't think there's any way to track the amount of items you have in your inventory. So if you have like, okay, how many potions are in my inventory for this custom menu I'm doing, you probably just have to make a custom variable for that, just the amount of whatever the first slot item is. And there's so many limitations too, like strings. Just doing strings is like you have to have, sometimes you just have to have an image of the string, or you can make your own string system where you do a show picture command for every letter, but I've never seen it done. I don't think anyone's ever done that except maybe the Final Fantasy VII custom battle system demo where someone remade Final Fantasy VII in 2D graphics, and the menus look spot on. Like, they look exactly identical. I'm not sure if you used letters. I'm pretty sure you used stringed letters where he doesn't just do show picture for words, but he also uses it for letters. But I don't know. I'm not 100% on that. But yeah, there's still so many limitations, even if you know how to work around them. And it made sense back in the day, I think. I do believe Game Maker was probably around by 2005. There was like Game Maker 4 or something like that. But even if there was like an engine that you could use that was more suitable for making a custom RPG with the battle system that you want, the tutorial, there was no Reddit, there was no YouTube. I mean, YouTube was, what, I think it probably came out in 2005, but like no one used it until really 2008, like really when it started popping off. But it wasn't like there was like a tutorial for like every single genre of game, for every single game engine. Like nowadays, like if I search even like Godot, like, which is a fairly, I guess it's an engine from 2010, but I feel like it's popping off fairly recently. And even that, it's like, there's, 2 tutorials for like a particular thing. And that's wild. Like, there was definitely a lot of tutorial content for RPG Maker, but I remember, as far as like learning how to make a CBS back then, it was pretty sparse. But I feel like the one plus for CBS is that, well, if you know how to invent pretty well, but you don't know coding or you don't like coding, then you could probably figure it out eventually, like how to make a battle system at some point. But I remember having a huge issue with it, so it wasn't that intuitive. I just think like you had to have some kind of computer science background. I think you had to understand like, okay, turn orders, probably use an array for that. Well, RPG Maker doesn't have arrays, but it has, variable pointers. So we just have a variable point to a variable that stores a variable, and that determines which variable to use. And then you kind of have an array system going for basic things like inventory management and whatnot. But this is crazy. Like, not even the custom battle system, but this menu. One thing you got to note, like, this is what I'm testing right now, is if you hold down a direction, the cursor just automatically goes to the next one. Which is, you see that, you probably notice it in Squaresoft RPGs and whatnot. It's a very popular thing. But I feel like a lot of CMSs wouldn't bother to have that. That's like a very particular attention to detail. Yeah, even like this game has like so many basic things, small attention to detail things that it just doesn't seem feasible at all. Like, I feel like the longer the game goes in development, the less mileage you get out of making a CBS. Basically, like you either had to just finish the game as soon as possible to make the CBS worth it, or the longer development goes, the more apparent it is to when you have to make new boss fights, new battles, new things, like the tool set just isn't quite there. Like, you're constantly like going to the event menu and adding variables, and it's just not quite the best. It's not the best user experience. I think it should be, if you want to finish a game, if you want to get a game done, you should probably make sure that the tools that you're using are somewhat feasible. If you use the default battle system in RPG Maker, default menu and stuff, you are basically, a lot of work is done for you, right? Like, you don't have to worry about the specifics of how an enemy attacks another enemy, or how a skill animation is played, or whether or not you want something custom to happen at a particular moment. The only default thing that this game uses is like the save menu. That's like the only thing it does. Like, it literally boots you to like the default, save menu system. And I believe like nowadays with RPG Maker, you can actually bypass that and make your own save system, like through a custom menu. But back then, I'm pretty sure Lashin had no other choice but to make a compromise. But yeah, I mean, yeah, so the overworld stuff is actually kind of neat. There's like, you know, your particular jumping puzzles or whatever. It's like jump prompts, I guess. But it's kind of interesting. Like, there's a lot of effort put into that as well. So like if there's an exclamation point that appears over your head and you stop, then the battle won't trigger. But I think maybe some battles it might be hard to react to. But yeah, like just playing through this game, it's like playing it like just sort of casually. I think it holds up. It's like I would actually like keep playing this. I just wish I had more time, because I say I don't have time, but it's just really a matter of like what games I feel like playing, and there's just so many games. Like if this were like 2005, I'd be playing this. Like if this were English in 2005, I'd be playing this all day. Like this would be all I would be playing. And that was the thing about RPG Maker games back in the day, was like the games were actually good. Like some of the top tier games of RPG Maker were like games that I wanted to make. I think that's kind of huge for a game making community. Are the games that people are making are also the games that you want to like aspire to? Because I was like, I remember like before RPG Maker, I would try out game engines, and there's just that connection of like, okay, like what can I make, right? Like what is possible? And then you see like a Tetris clone or something, and you know that you could probably make something better than that, but it just didn't inspire that kind of ambition. And I think this game, like Velsarbor, definitely had an influence on me, like as a game creator, as someone who likes RPG Maker, as someone who wanted to make something like this in RPG Maker. But sorry, my cat's in the way. But yeah, man, Belzabor. What else can you say about it? I kind of want to play more of it when I have time, but just playing an hour of it, I really think this game holds up for the most part. Like, I mean, it's hard to say where the writing goes, or like whether or not the writing's good, but it also makes me want to play Crosscode at some point. I do have the game in my Steam library, but again, it's just nowadays it's just like so hard. There's just so many games and content out there that like back when Belzabor came out, this is all I had. Like, I mean, I guess it was a matter of like free games. Like, I was always on the lookout for free games that were free and they were good, right? And I felt like RPG Maker actually satisfied that to an extent. Because even the mediocre RPG Maker games I think were far better than a lot of indie games back in, 2004, 2005. I mean, Cave Story, I think, came out around 2005. I probably played it around 2006, somewhere around that time. But before Cave Story, like, you had this going on. And, yeah, I don't know. Like this was a time where you didn't even really know where to get games, aside from the occasional website that you just find through, like, affiliate links or whatever. And Gaming Ground Zero was like legit a place. Like, thinking back on it, the Gaming Ground Zero was a legit place I would look up for playing games and whatnot. And yeah, I guess I'm much older now. I'm like in my 30s. Like, the enthusiasm is still there for these kind of games. Like, I still get goosebumps from the intro, but I struggle to even update, to keep up to date on the latest RPG Maker game news. As someone who's like running a Historia blog, I guess you could say, I just haven't had time because I'm working on my own game. I work in the game industry myself. Like, for a living, I work on games, and even when I'm on my break, all I want to do is I just want to play Tekken. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't really have a whole lot of time to just cover this stuff, and I'm glad that this English translation existed. I don't know who translated the game though. I should probably look that up if you don't mind hearing some clicking noises, because yeah, I should probably translate the translator. I should credit the translator. Sorry, but yeah, I remember I found that the translation on like GitHub. You know, like it's not exactly a like a big tentpole announcement that this game is translated. And like there's no game page on RMN for Belzabor, I don't think. So you just kind of have to know where to get this thing, you know. Which I feel like should be more widespread. I feel like I should get the message out there, but I just never had time to get into it, you know. And you know, a game like this, like playing it now, just getting the feel for like what an RPG should or can be. You know, this translation, this sort of revisit of the game, makes me want to, like, you know, get back into the RPG stuff, RPG Maker in general, I guess. Yeah, so I believe it is a translation by WatDuhHekBro. It's very easy to. It's heck without the C. And I believe everything is translated. Everything says 100%. So yeah, I mean, there's 300 maps. I imagine the game is probably sizable, I believe, but I'm trying to look for like a playtime or something. Okay, well, there's 46 available videos on the German version, I think. It's hard to get a feel for like how long the game actually is. I would say a couple of hours. Like probably 5 hours in this demo. Just looking at the German Let's Plays of this game. But yeah, I don't know. I'm running out of breath, but I figured I'd just kind of go over it. Just in general. I should probably put up a link maybe for the game. Let me see. Yeah, so this English patch actually came out in 2020, not 2022, but 2 years ago. So I feel like I'm doing like, oh my god, the big scoop, but it's not. That's how like delayed I've been with keeping up with this sort of stuff. But I think it's better now than never, you know. Yeah, I recommend this game. I want to play more of it. I like what I got so far, even though I probably played up until the part where I probably gave up on the game when it was only in German. But the story seems pretty decent. I think the character dialogue is pretty neat, and it's, you know, it's what you'd want out of a game like Grandia or something, like at that level of like writing and enjoyment, you know. And I think, yeah, like I think this game it does kind of hold up today, like just as an RPG. Like if you just showed this, like it's a 2D, you know, Super Nintendo, back to basics game. You know, there's some rips, you know, just keep in mind that some of it's, you got the bear from Final Fantasy VI, but it's animated, which is pretty slick. And I think like this game it kind of would stand toe to toe with the current RPGs that are made in RPG Maker. I forget which was the game. It was a really important RPG Maker game that came out recently. God, it's escaping me. Maybe we should look that up. I don't know why when I do these videos I always like talk really fast when I should just be very chill. I should treat this like a Twitch stream or like a like a small thing, but I don't know. Anyway, it's on par with a lot of other games that are coming out, you know, now or recently. Just because I think, you know, the thing, you could say that it's a very bad idea to make a game as ambitious as this, especially as your first or second project, and put all this effort into the polish and put all this, you know, all this stuff, blah blah blah. I certainly agree with that notion, but at the very least, if you do a good job on something and you do put a lot of effort and a lot of polish into something, as time goes on, like it'll endure it a little bit, you know. Maybe we'll get an operating system where RPG Maker games can no longer be played properly without some finagling, and it just becomes less accessible. Though, I mean, with the easy RPG player, I think it might be a different story. But point is, I think when you put a lot of effort and ambitious work into something, the star of what you created will shine a little bit brighter. It will last. The spark will last a bit longer. And I speak from, this is like purely from a spectacle production value standpoint. I definitely think the best quality of most RPG Maker games, the best of the best RPG Maker games, is the writing, usually. There's only so much you can do to improve a framework that is essentially Final Fantasy VI or lower, or even Final Fantasy IV gameplay style. But there's a lot you can do with story and pacing and just the general, like, you know, just making a world with characters in them and making them memorable. I think no matter how many Final Fantasy IV clones or whatever you want to call them, or whatever you want to be dismissive of them, I don't think you could get tired of them either, you know. But you know, some people just want to move on. I understand why someone like Lashon would want to make Crosscode. And Crosscode, I remember that demo coming out back in like 2010 or something. Like, even Crosscode took a while to make. And I think that paid off too. Like, it's just as ambitious as this game, but I think it's a little more... I think you just play as one character and that kind of thing. You know, like, it's more action. It's more of an action game. It has probably more of a simple story. But for the most part, it's probably still just as ambitious as this game. But again, I think what counts a lot is the, you know, if you put a lot of effort into something, it does last a bit longer. There's something to talk about, right? There's something to kind of, like, even in 2022, I'm talking about this game, this old-ass game, this seemingly amateur, you know, from the amateur game-making scene. I'm still talking about it, you know. And, you know, that's just the nature of RPGs, and, like, what I like about RPGs and the sensibilities that come with growing up with the game engine. Which is a weird thing to say, I guess, because not many... I was probably about 12 years old, or 11 even, when RPG Maker 2000, like, kind of came out and came into my life. So there's kind of like this weird notion of, like, I could play... If I was in the worst mood ever, or like in a bad time in my life, I could sit down and play an RPG Maker game, no problem, you know. There's that aspect of it where, like, it's hard. I don't know if I could recommend this particular game to just anyone, but maybe someone into RPGs in general. Like, they remember Super Nintendo games, like they could probably enjoy this. But I appreciate this, right? Because of the effort and the ambition that went into it, and I have a background context as to why it is. No, it's using the bridge from Chrono Trigger. You know, I know that, but I don't know if I've seen a Chrono Trigger bridge in an RPG Maker game before. Like, especially recreated as specifically as this. And yeah. Anyway, point is, the game is really well made, especially for its time. But even looking at it now, like, I don't know, there's a lot of indie RPGs that just don't quite stick the landing. And this one does. Even after 15 years or so? Well, that's not how you do math. Yeah, I'd say 17 years. 17 years? Is that right? Was 2005, 2000... Hold on, let me just do some quick stupid math here. Yeah, 17 years. This game's 17 years old, technically speaking. I guess it's hard to say because it was a demo that was updated probably throughout 2007, probably-ish. But yeah. Also, this boss fight. I think this boss fight is actually pretty... Like, the game's kind of easy up until this point, but this boss fight got me into a pickle where I was constantly reviving and constantly making some questionable choices. It's like once you... Like, I kind of ignored the tutorial to defend because I wanted to heal because I didn't think it would do that much damage, but now I'm in this constant spiral of healing, taking too much damage, healing. But, you know, I'm glad this boss was a little bit tough. Because it does show that this game has some teeth, battle system-wise. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. Like, I think Belzabor is an interesting, like, specimen, because it's come from the German community, the Germans, which I think a lot of people had a respect for, especially after Belzabor. Like, it was just a definitely... It's one of those games that, you know, emitted from way outside of its own scene. Like, you didn't have to know German to know how sick the limit break was in the intro was. Anyway, this game was sick, and everyone knew it back in the day. It transcends language barriers. And yeah, like the German community, I think was always kind of, I don't know, there's just something about the German community. They had like better maps than ours, they would have better visuals than ours. And even like the kind of like, the okay looking games, like the games that weren't super graphically amazing, kind of look better than ours, but it's hard to know, right? It's hard to know unless it's translated in English. Like if the story is good enough, or, you know, is the battle system any good, kind of thing. There's apparently a lot of Finnish German games that are like classic. Like, oh, this is a game, like, I love this game, you know? And like not only is there an RPG Maker barrier, like you have to kind of know about the RPG Maker history to kind of appreciate it, but then there's also the language barrier of, you know, either learning German or waiting for someone to translate it in German, or English rather. That's a huge thing with like Super Nintendo games. Like there's still Super Nintendo games that haven't been translated, and every once in a while, like an RPG comes out, and it's like playing a Super Nintendo RPG for the first time. Like it's like a new tentpole release, and that's kind of fun. But that's kind of the same feeling I get when playing Belzabor. This particular game is like, oh, it's like it just came out. Like it's just like there's a new RPG Maker 2000 game to play. And people are still making games in this engine. Well, 2003 particularly. Beloved Rapture is pretty up there, I feel like, in terms of it's using default battle system, but it's kind of pushing the limits as far as like animations go, and with patching and whatnot, and is enlisting Cherry's help, I assume, with that kind of stuff, and also some other RPG Maker users. But yeah, I mean, I think Beloved Rapture is probably the next game to look forward to if you're just like, I don't know, you're just in a weird, desperate situation where it's like, I can only play RPG Maker games, and I need a new like classic RPG that's sort of like this. But I guess you got probably like 5 hours of this game as well if you haven't known about this before. But yeah, Velsarbor is amazing. Like, I don't know. I just think not just the game itself, but just the influence it had and the sort of beacon it showed, and kind of the way it represented the German RPG makers. Because I remember at RPG Atelier, I would go to that site just to check out screenshots, just to see the screenshots of the games of that era. And yeah, I don't know. Like, I think I think there's just like a lot of cool games that I wish I could play that aren't in my language, and you know, maybe I should pick up German sometime, you know, or learn French. Get to my heritage, I suppose. There's also the French RPG Maker community. I forget if Adempia is even translated. That game's crazy too, at least from a graphic standpoint. But yeah, you always wonder with a lot of these games is like, is the story actually good? Is it like, you know, or is it just kind of fluffy? And I'd say this game is like pretty on par with like, you know, a decent Grandia game so far. Anyway, you know, Kindred Saga was like kind of praised for its like custom battle system, but I actually like the writing in that game as well. Just from like a characterization standpoint, which is usually like stereotype is like, oh, the game has good graphics, good battle system, but you know, the author didn't put too much thought in the story, or they, you know, they spread their arms too thin or something like that. But I feel like that's not always the case. Like, I think, you know, usually you can have a pretty all-around basis in storytelling. And I'm kind of curious what happens to this little chick that just hatched. So, yeah, I'll probably play more of it, but probably not record it or anything like that. I just want to get my thoughts on this game. I think this game's cool. The Limit Break is still cool, even to this day. Even all this time after that local meetup in Germany, it's still cool animation. But yeah, peace.